EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and these are 10 cards you may have forgotten about from Warhammer 40K. I'm going deep on some of these newer sets. So these are all sets that have come out since my channel started, and I'm digging down deep to some of the cards that don't get much love that I think are pretty good. Of course, every set now is engineered towards the Commander format. So for that reason, a lot of cards get overshadowed, and in particular with Warhammer 40K, it was absolutely engineered for the Commander format. It is in fact a Commander set, right? It was made specifically for Commander, so for that reason, there's a ton of great cards. I keep coming back to this set and finding cards over and over again. It is one of the best Commander sets out there, in my opinion. Regardless of how you feel about Universes Beyond, in my opinion, it is probably top 5 as far as Commander sets go. And not because there's a bunch of busted cards, just a lot of really interesting cards doing really interesting, unique things. For example, I'm going to start out with Toxicrene, one that I did mention originally when I talked about Warhammer 40K, not really seeing much play at all. 3 and a green, Tyranid 2/4, Reach and Death Touch. And I'll just say, having a creature that is just going to sit on the battlefield, because you're never going to attack with this guy anyway, that has Reach and Death Touch, basically says nobody attack me. So that on its own is pretty darn good. But this ability is super powerful and super interesting. All lands have tap, add 1 mana of any color. So it's a mana fixer. Don't really need that in green, do we? It is nice. However, they lose all other abilities. So the reason you're going to be playing this card likely is because it is going to shut off all other abilities of all lands. There's a lot of really neat ways to use a card like that. I mean, first of all, it just shuts off all the powerful lands. Any Cabal Coffers or Gaia's Cradle is going to be just tap for 1 mana. It's going to shut those off. It shuts off any powerful ability of any land. Even a Glacial Chasm or a Maze of Ith, which don't normally tap for mana, are now just going to tap for mana, and they're not going to do what they normally would do. So if you have a deck that's green that is not doing any of those things, this is a great card that is just going to definitely, I mean, it's an absolute guarantee that you're going to be hurting your opponents with this card. And in fact, maybe even significantly. It also mana fixes, so there is that as well. But maybe give it a try in one of your decks. Dracnian, I'm going to call this. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. 4 black in a red legendary artifact equipment. It is a 6 mana equipment. That is a lot. However, when it enters the battlefield, you're going to exile up to 1 target creature. So this is a way to exile creatures stapled on an artifact, an equipment. In Rakdos colors, again, all of that on its own is just very, very unique. And then also equipped creature has Menace and gets +X+O, where X is the exiled card's power, and equip 2. So pretty decent equipment. For me, if I'm playing a Rakdos deck in artifacts, I'm probably going to give this some consideration because likely I can, cheat it into play, get it back from my graveyard, stuff like that. Do not hit your opponent's commander with this, okay? I guess that would be a drawback here because, of course, it's giving equipped creature +X+O, where X is the exiled card's power, and of course your opponent is just going to put their commander back into the command zone, so it's not going to do anything, right? It's not going to see that card in exile. So I advise anyway not to use this on your opponent's commander, but use it on any other creature. Any big scary creature you use this on, and then on top of that, it becomes an equipment that's going to give you a really nice boost. Talisman of Nurgle is a really interesting card. 2 and a black, Astartes Warrior 2/3 with lifelink. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. If 7 or more creatures died this turn, instead you draw 7 cards and you lose 7 life. Now, I would say that last ability is really incredibly difficult, in fact, to actually get. There has to be some pretty significant circumstances, right? I mean, if you are in a sacrifice theme, I would say it's likely you can sacrifice 7 creatures on your turn. I mean, they don't have to be your creatures. It has to be just creatures that died this turn. So if I have a Grave Pact effect, I sacrifice a creature, everyone else sacrifices a creature. Now that's already 4. So basically with a Grave Pact, all I would have to do is sacrifice 2 creatures. Everyone else does as well. I get to draw 7 cards on my end step. Pretty good. I think the other likely scenario for that trigger is I board wipe on my turn, kill all creatures, then play my Talisman of Nurgle, right? It's not in play yet. I play it after the board wipe, and then at the beginning of my end step, yes, 7 or more creatures are died this turn, and I get to draw 7 cards. However, I would not lean into that too heavily. It might happen once in a while. This is just a card draw on your end step if a creature died this turn, which of course in so many black decks is going to be happening every single time. It's just a card draw on your end step. and the other part is added bonus if you can actually get it once in a while. Convergence of Dominion is a really interesting card that I missed the first time I looked at Warhammer, the second time, and probably even the third time. Only this time when I went really, really deep did I come across it. It is a very niche card, but it is also very unique. 3 mana artifact. As long as you control your commander, activated abilities of cards in your graveyard cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce mana in that ability's activation cost to less than 1. And you can also pay 3, tap, mill 3 cards. That is obviously a very unique effect. And I think this card is a slam dunk in certain commanders. Again, obviously it's very niche, but in the decks where you're going to be using it, it's fantastic. Cedrus the Traitor King is probably the best example because, of course, the unearth that he's giving to creature cards in your graveyard is, of course, going to be used in the graveyard. It is going to be reduced by 2. So instead of paying 2 and a black to unearth your creatures, you're only paying a single black. Sliver Gravemother would be another one where each Sliver creature card in your graveyard has Encore X, where X is its mana value. So, of course, reducing that by 2 is going to be pretty fantastic. Again, pretty niche, obviously. However, the commanders that want to have that card should definitely be playing it. Blight Grenade, really great removal option, I think. Of course, we have lots of great ones, but this one I think is more specific. So it fits in more specific themes. 5 and a black. Sorcery, destroy target creature. And of course, 5 mana sorcery, destroy creature is terrible. However, all creatures get -3/-3 until end of turn. So this is really sort of a very specific board wipe. And for me, I'm going to be using this in a deck where I have a commander that has a bigger than 3 toughness. I had this in my Kinzu deck because, of course, my commander's a 5/4. So I am not going to lose my commander to this, right? I'm going to cast this. One of my opponents has a creature with a bigger than 3 toughness that I really want to get off the table. I'm going to kill that. I'm going to get a whole bunch of other stuff as well. And my commander's surviving, right? So that's where I really like this. Is very unique in what it's doing. It's kind of targeted removal and also a sweeper. We don't see that very often. And I really like it in a deck where you're definitely not going to hit your commander when you cast it. Well, let's talk about Malanthrope. 1 green and a blue Tyrannid 2/2 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, exile target player's graveyard. Graveyard hate, well, that's great. Every commander deck needs that, right? However, you're also going to put a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature card exiled this way. So this is a fantastic, in my opinion, graveyard hate card. Not only are you exiling that Marin deck's graveyard or that Muldrotha deck's graveyard or that Sidisi deck. Again, any of those commanders you absolutely need graveyard hate against or it's just game over, but you're also going to get a giant flyer, right? This guy has flying. So now I have a giant evasion creature on top of it. I really like this guy a lot. It's also an ETB, so it can be used in a blinking deck. This card really should see more play in my opinion. Kill, Maim, and Burn is, I think, a pretty darn good removal option. 3 black and a red instant. So kind of pricey, but it is an instant. Choose 1 or more. Destroy target artifact. Destroy target creature. Kill, Maim, Burn deals 3 damage to target player. Of course, you're always going to choose all of these. I mean, I guess there is the rare situation where there's an artifact you want to destroy, but there's no creatures on the battlefield that you want to destroy. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. 5 mana instant speed, destroy an artifact and a creature, and then also deal 3 damage to a player is a pretty good removal option in the format. I think for sure this card should be in more decks. Cybernetica Datasmith is a really funny, interesting card, and this definitely doesn't see a lot of play in the Commander format. It is super niche. Where exactly do you want to be playing it? I'm not sure, but it is such a unique card. I got to give it another mention. 1 blue and a black Human Artificer 01. Protection from robots. So that's interesting. I will say, though, your opponent will not be able to crib swap your Cybernetica Datasmith, of course, because that crib swap has changeling, which means it's a robot, and this creature has protection from robots. There are some fringe scenarios where it can be good. Also works with the other ability, of course. Pay a blue and tap, target player draws a card. Another target player creates a 4/4 colorless robot artifact creature token with this creature can't block. So that means you are donating 4/4 creatures to your opponents. I mean, I guess you could also make the token yourself, right? That's where this ability it gets really interesting is, okay, I can have an opponent draw a card. So maybe I want to play this in a Nekusar deck. I know there's a bazillion fantastic options for a Nekusar deck as far as forcing your opponents to draw cards, but this is a neat one that I can have my opponent draw a card and then I get the 4/4 robot. I think more likely you will be drawing the card yourself and then giving your opponent a 4/4 robot. I like it in a gold theme, obviously, for obvious reasons. I like it in a gold theme. Not sure how many blue-black decks are doing that, but you're giving your opponents more creatures that they have to attack with. And of course, it can't block is an added bonus there. If for some reason they end up swinging at you with that robot, of course, your Data Smith has protection from robots, so it can sit there and block all day. I think this is a pretty neat card. I think you could definitely throw this card in just about any deck, and it can be like a politics card where you can have some of your opponents either draw a card or make a robot. You get the other option, right? Either way, but also probably nicely fits into some certain themes as well. Gene Stealer Patriarch is another one that I mentioned when Warhammer 40K first came out, and I mentioned it because it's a pretty neat card and also a card I thought was going to see quite a bit of play in the format and doesn't really see much at all. So 4 and a blue, Tyranid 4/4. Whenever Gene Stealer Patriarch attacks, put an infection counter on target creature defending player controls. Whenever a creature with an infection counter on it dies, you create a token that's a copy of that creature. Except it's a Tyranid in addition to its other types. That's a pretty neat ability. I guess there just really isn't a specific archetype where this fits, right? Maybe that's why it doesn't really see much play. Where are you going to be playing this? In a deck where, I mean, you're not really stealing your opponent's creatures. You're creating copies of them. It works in a clone theme if you're doing that. It's just an all-around good card in a commander game. That's it. Just you attack, you put an infection counter on a creature defending player controls, and then when it dies, you get a copy of it. I don't know. It is a token copy, so maybe in a token theme, it's kind of niche, but at the same time, it's very open-ended and just all around a good card that you could put in any deck. All right, I'm going to end off with Acolyte Hybrid, which is definitely a card that I think probably gets overshadowed by a lot of people because it doesn't seem great. However, I think it's pretty versatile. So 2 and a red, Tyranid, human. So many Tyranids on this list. 2/2. Whenever Acolyte Hybrid attacks, destroy up to 1 target artifact. If an artifact is destroyed this way, its controller draws a card. And I like this card because, of course, it can be used on our opponents or it can be used on ourselves. We can use this as card draw, and I just made a video ranking the colors in the format, and I said, man, red doesn't really have any card draw at all. There really isn't hardly any cards that just say draw a card on it in red. This is one of them. This is a way to actually draw a card, not impulse draw, just straight up draw a card in red. And if you are in a deck that is cranking out treasure tokens or clue tokens or any kind of artifact tokens, it's very easy to attack with this guy, destroy one of those tokens to draw a card, right? So it becomes essentially whenever this guy attacks, you get to draw a card. But also, of course, if my opponent plays an Akroma's Memorial or something, now I can attack with this guy and destroy their Akroma's Memorial. Maybe I'll lose him in combat, don't care. I got that really powerful artifact off the battlefield. So I really like this guy. He's very versatile. He's a card draw option in mono red. Hey, I actually found one. So there you go, 10 cards from Warhammer 40K that you may have forgotten about or never even saw before, likely in a lot of these scenarios. None of these cards really see much play in the Commander format, and I think they deserve a little bit more love. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.